In today's video, I'm going to show you how to find the right STR for your specific scenario. If you're watching this video, you're probably a high net worth individual making $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 a year, and you're trying to get into real estate, but you don't know the exact acquisition strategy and you don't really know where to start finding your first deal. So in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how you can find good properties that are short-term rentals that will work for you. So this starts with step number one, which is establishing cash on hand. Okay, so cash on hand. What does this mean? You need to look at the cash that you have available, and that's going to set the boundary for what kind of properties you can actually afford to buy. Let's take a quick example and say you have $100,000 cash on hand. So let's use this example, $100K cash on hand. Now, there are two potential ways to calculate what you can afford. If you go down the second, or there's really three if we want to break it down. So the first one is going to be your 20% down property. Okay, so that's going to allow you to buy a $500,000 property. That'd be a normal bank loan, 20% down, 80 from the bank. Everybody's happy, good to go. The second thing, if you have a dual purpose property, a second home, you can put as little as 10% down, okay, which allows you to buy a property that's about $900K. Now, why is this not exactly 10%? Well, there's something called a conforming limit, okay? And a conforming limit is the maximum amount of loan that you can take for a second home, which is based on the area in which you live. I think it's like $760,000 in loan. So if it's $760K in loan, and you have 100K, you can still put down 100K and you could buy like an 860K house, something like that. Okay, this number changes every single year. Don't hold me accountable to this number right now because it changes and this is just not that important. So 20% down, 500K, you can get around double that-ish if you do a 10% down second home loan. And then there's a third option, which is seller financing. Seller financing, many times you can do 5 to 10% down, which means you could buy probably up to $1.5 million property with 100K down. My best example of leverage that I've done is I've had a property I've put down $75K for a $1 million property totaling a 7.5% down payment. Now, that's not always going to be the case for every single transaction, but I'm just giving you the examples. So step one, establish your cash on hand, okay? That's going to take us into step two. Step two is we need to figure out a location, okay? Now, what things should we optimize for in the location category? Number one, not near you, okay? The reason we don't want anything to be near you is because you end up doing a bunch of extra work that you shouldn't do, and you get lazy with systems, process, SOP, and being a good business owner, and because you just say, I'll just handle this, I'll just handle that. So don't put it right where you live. If it's in proximity, that might be okay, but we're not optimizing for where you live. Second thing, we want to optimize for a compliant short-term rental, okay? What does that mean? It means that the county or the city or the township allows for short-term rentals. Okay, this is very important. I know it seems obvious, but it's very important because if they don't allow that, it's a problem, right? And the reason it's a problem is because you're going to buy the property, you're not going to be able to run as a short-term rental, which means you're going to get a bunch of fines and you're going to have a bunch of problems. So, not near you, in a compliant area. A third thing is you need to ask yourself, as a new buyer of real estate, are you more interested in doing all the setup, all the furnishing and design, or you want to buy something that's pre-furnished? For most people, I think a pre-furnished property is a good starting spot. Do I think you always have to have a pre-furnished property? No, I think there's great design features. You can go to a property, work on designing yourself, or you could hire a designer. There's a bunch of different things you can do to achieve this, but I think for your very first property, a pre-furnished property makes the most sense, okay? Now, we got all the details. Location, not near you. Compliant short-term rental, pre-furnished. So we got the location piece locked in, and we also have the cash on hand and what you can afford to lock in. Now, what makes a good deal, okay? What makes a good deal? Two main parameters that I look for. Can I get in for 10% or less as a down payment? And can I get a 5% interest rate or better? These are the two ideal scenarios. Am I saying that every single deal I've ever bought fits these two? Absolutely not. But these are the ideal scenarios. I have homes I put 20%, 25% down, homes that I have 9% interest rates on with bank loans. There's a lot of different types of deals that you can do, but this is the deal optimization, okay? So 10% down, less payment, 5% interest rate. Now, what is some of the other things that you should consider when you get into a deal? So we talked about the cash on hand. I'd always recommend that you have 20 to 40K excess cash, okay? So this is what we'd call reserves. Hopefully my spelling is good. Reserves, 20 to 40,000 extra cash. Why are you going to need this? Two reasons, okay? So reason number one is what we call ramp. I'll put these number one here, ramp. And the second thing is going to be CapEx, okay? So in every single pro forma, when you underwrite a deal, there's budgeting for maintenance and capital expense. Maintenance is like cutting the grass. Capital expense is like replacing the roof. CapEx is something that comes out of your pocket that you pay to improve a property, and it's generally a large expense that has a lifetime. The lifetime's 5, 7, 15, 20, 30 years, like a roof, 30-year life, okay? The reason you have to have these cash in the case of CapEx is on a new property, you're going to have to spend some money up front, whether it's design, furniture, maintenance, CapEx, something like that. You're going to have to put money in up front. That's going to be a sunk cost. The second thing is ramp, okay? Short-term rentals generally have this type of cyclical model where they go up and down. There's a high season and a low season, okay? But the ramp is this. The property has to ramp up in revenue. Okay, well, maybe we'll put this over here. Revenue over time, okay? And if you don't plan for this, you're going to have a major issue, because in your first month, your pro forma, okay, your pro forma might say that you're going to make $10,000 in revenue. But we have a ramping process that we have to go through for any short-term rental, and that ramping process can be typically 20% per month for 5 months. So there's your 5 months across the bottom. Your income is going to look like this. If 10K is your pro forma number, you got 2, 4, 6, 8, right? 8, 6, 4, 2. Which means if your pro forma number at $10,000 produces you $1,000 per month in cash flow, let's suppose, okay? That means at $8,000, we'll do a little chart here. So we'll say at 10K in revenue, you make $1,000 in cash flow. At $8,000 in revenue, assuming all your expenses are still the same, what's going to happen? You're going to have negative $1,000 in cash flow. At 6K in revenue, you're going to have negative $3,000 in cash flow. At 4K in rev, you're going to have negative $5,000 in cash flow. And at 2K rev, you're going to have negative $7,000 in cash flow. So let's assume your ramping schedule holds true. And let's just take out seasonality for a quick second. Let's just say you ramp from the bottom to the top here over time. Let's see in the first 12 months, okay, so month 1 through month 12, how much money do you actually need on hand to make this work? So we got $7,000 you're going to lose plus $5,000 that you're going to lose, so we're at $12,000. We'll add another $3,000 in there, which is $15,000. We'll add another $1,000 in there, which is $16,000, okay? So in the first 4 months, you're $16,000 negative. Then you go positive $1,000 in the next month, so now you're back down to 15. And let's say you do $1,000 for the next, that was 5 months, for the next 7 months. So you go 7,000 positive over the next 7 months, which puts you at still negative $8,000 on the year, right? 15,000 negative plus 7,000 positive, negative 8,000 year 1. So if you look at year 1 on a property versus year 2 versus year 3, if your pro forma, again at 10K, is 1,000 in cash flow, that's 12K per year positive cash flow. But in year 1, we said up here, you're negative $8,000, okay? In year 2, you're positive $12,000. So what is your net after these? It's only $4,000 in cash flow. But remember, the goal of real estate is not just to generate cash flow. You're paying down a mortgage, you're getting some tax advantages, you're getting some appreciation on the property, and you're building net worth over time. Your only goal is not this stuff. This cash flow thing is not the only goal. Although that's important, that's not the only thing you should be focused on. So just to reiterate the things you need in order to find the right STR: Cash on hand, establish what you can afford to buy. Location, along with probably something that's pre-furnished. Don't forget the compliance, making sure it's a good compliant deal. And then optimizing your deal for 10% down payment or less, 5% interest rate or better if possible. Then you need to make sure that you have your right cash reserves, $20,000 to $40,000. Obviously, if you buy a much bigger property, you're going to need more than this. You need to remember that there's a ramping period, okay? And the ramp is 20% per month for 5 months in most cases. You have this cyclical model of seasonality up and down, and you're going to have massive CapEx in your first 1 to 2 years, especially if you buy a seller finance deal. Here we talked about the ramping, month 1 through month 5, ramping up to $10,000. And we acknowledge here that we're losing cash flow for many months because you're going to have to ramp. In addition to that, we calculated your first year net cash flow is probably going to be like negative money. That's normal in any type of real estate investing. People who tell you that you're cash flow positive all the time are just out of their mind. That's not going to happen. And then the last part here is the net cash flow over 2 years when you start breaking into positive cash flow territory. So that's year 1 and 2 out of year 30, right? Because you have a 30-year mortgage on this property. Maybe you don't hold that long, but that's the ultimate map. So the next time you go to buy a short-term rental, make sure you set up these key parameters up front, write them on a spreadsheet, make sure you understand your numbers before you get diving into a property. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you in the next video.